we actually wrote a bill and found a sponsor in the House easily. And then we began diving for a Senate sponsor. We finally were successful at finding a senator who was willing to sponsor the bill. So then we had the bill that we could start pushing. We literally were at the legislature every week. Dozens of homeschool moms and dads coming to Nashville every week. And the board was meeting weekly also. Everybody was driving to Nashville to meet. So it was an amazing push, amazing commitment on the part of just volunteers willing to step forward.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is another episode of Homeschool Talks, where I get to talk to interesting people in the world of homeschooling. And today, I am honored to welcome Claiborne Thornton. Claiborne and his wife, Lana, have been just cherished friends to me over my entire time here at HSLDA. They are longtime homeschoolers, homeschool pioneers, and legendary leaders here in the state of Tennessee, where we are recording today from Nashville from our HSLDA National Leaders Conference. Welcome, Claiborne.
Jim, good to see you today, sir, and delighted to get a chance to be with you and loving the conference. It's been great, so it's great to cut out some time and have this chat.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this. I have known you for a long time, and I think that a lot of people maybe don't really appreciate or understand just how difficult it was for parents to homeschool back when you and Lana first started. How did you guys get involved in homeschooling way back then?
Way back then, we listened to James Dobson's radio program. I think it was in 80 and 81. He had Dr. Raymond Moore on twice each summer in July or so, and we listened to those. And Lana said, Claiborne, I listened to this today, and you got to listen to it. I didn't hear it during the day, but in the summertime, they rebroadcast in the evening. So I listened to it that evening. I heard Dr. Moore say homeschooling is a good thing. I heard him say that it is a great thing for kids to get their foundational education in the home under one tutelage. As soon as I heard that, I said, Lana, we got a homeschool. And Lana looked at me and she said, you're crazy. So we spent a year talking with people at our church, finding other people that had homeschooled underground in Tennessee and talking with them, talking with educator at a local teachers college. And so we developed some deep friendships. And they cautioned us about that, knowing that it was not a clearly legal alternative in Tennessee. And we were challenged to not homeschool if we couldn't do it legally, as Christians trying to be responsible and obey the law. So we heard a program the next year. And when we heard the program the next year, we'd been through enough, we'd read enough books of Dr. Moore that we decided, okay, we're going to do this thing. So I told that to the people that we've been received counsel from at our church. And I went down to the zoning board in Metro, Nashville, to speak with them and told them that I wanted to start a school. And the school would be in my home. And so they said, well, you need to go over to the person that does school zoning. I said, okay. So I went over and talked with him and explained to him what I wanted to do. And he was somewhat receptive, but he said, no, you need to go talk with the guy over at the home zoning board. So I went over and spoke with the guy at the home zoning, explained to him what I would like to do. And he said, well, you really don't need to talk to me. You need to go talk with the school guy. And I said, you know, that's interesting because I just came from talking with a school guy and he told me I needed to talk with you. And he said, well, let's go together over there. And basically I explained to them that we would be enrolled in a school, but that the instruction would take place in her home. And they talked back and forth about that for a bit. And then the gentleman in charge of the school zoning said, "Yeah, I think this would be under my jurisdiction. And yes, you can do this." And he signed me up. And I paid the $20 fee to become, for my home to be a school, an extension of a school. I was very delighted they didn't ask me where the school was located, the physical building, because we were enrolling with a school that was in Chicago. But that didn't come up in the conversation, so I just kind of let that lay.
Was this back in the day when Clon Lara was the thing?
This was in 1981. I don't know.
The school in Chicago.
Was it Christian Liberty Academy?
Christian Liberty Academy.
Christian Liberty Academy. Okay.
Wow, that's a name from the past.
Yeah, for a long time ago.
How old were your children then?
At that time, Christina was in kindergarten and just getting ready to go into first grade. So born in 75, so this was 81, so 6 years old.
So had she started in public school as a kindergarten student?
Well, in Nashville, there's several really good private schools. And with the private schools, you either are a member of the church and are engaged early, or you've got a lot of money. And so we were in the former category. So we got involved early and committed early and did a preschool year with Christina, and then enrolled John in preschool, and then Christina did kindergarten. So, so we were headed down that track in that way.
Now, you mentioned this intervening year. At the start of that year, when you heard the Dobson program, you were sold. Lana was less sold.
Yeah.
A year goes by. Now you're talking to all the zoning board people. What's Lana thinking about at that time?
Over the year, we went through the discussions, and it was so helpful to hear from one of the educational specialists at Peabody School for Teachers. She described how she and her husband had moved out into a remote county and leased a property out in the middle of a field to homeschool her fifth grade son because he had gotten so far behind in his reading. And so she worked with him for that year and got him fully up to speed, and then came back and re-enrolled him in the public school there, and he was fine and went on through school just fine. So those kinds of discussion, and then we had the good fortune of being able to talk with one of the people that does the grading on the ACT, and she was an advocate helping us to understand that better, and so Barb was very helpful to let us see the pathway on that too. So we had our deep questions and we got those answered. So that was good.
So was your motivation was primarily faith-based after listening to those radio shows, which incidentally are notorious. Our founders at HSLDA, Mike Ferris and Mike Smith, started HSLDA in 1983, and they both traced their homeschool origin story back to that, one of the rebroadcasts of that same show back in the day. So 1981, you started a Chicago school in your Nashville home.
Right.
Then what?
Well, it was interesting. About a month into the school, we get a knock at the door. I'm at work. Lana gets a knock at the door with the kids. And of course, we were under Dr. Moore's instructions, make sure to keep the blinds closed. Kids don't answer the phone until after 2 o'clock. No kids out of the house till after 2 o'clock. So we had all the rules for making sure that we would not be discovered by our neighbors for fear of getting turned in and having some problems. So we were following all that. And then we get the knock at the door. Lana opens the door with some fear and trepidation and finds that there's a fireman standing on the other side of the door. The local fire department had been notified of a new school in the area, and they were responsible to go around and inspect the school to make sure that it met all the fire code requirements. And he looked at her and said, "Well, this looked like a home." Mm-hmm. "Well, yes, this is our home." He said, "Well, it says here that you're a school." "Yes, sir, we're teaching our kids here." "I'm not exactly sure how that fits into the program, but I don't think I need to come in and inspect your home. I think y'all are okay." So, so that was the kind of the first outside the box kind of contact that we had like that. But that was in the early launch of our homeschool program. Yeah.
So you began homeschooling in 1981. The legality of homeschooling in Tennessee was, I think you described it as dubious or something like that.
Not clearly legal.
Not clearly legal.
Yes.
Not clearly legal.
Yes.
Well, so that leaves a little wiggle room.
Enough wiggle room for me. Yeah.
Did you find any additional wiggle room?
We did not. We just stayed hidden. We did start finding a few other folk that were homeschooling, but the number really, primarily through church, and then the number really exploded when we had several people that were being charged for home education across the state. Actually, we met our first homeschool family through the local newspaper. My wife's father called up and says, and they knew we were homeschooling. My parents did not know, but my wife's parents did. They lived in Nashville also, so it was impossible to not talk with them about it. And so we did that. But we got a call from my father-in-law. And he said, well, there are other people homeschooling in Tennessee. Oh, that's wonderful. We're glad to hear that. And so he said, yeah, they were on the first page of the second section of the newspaper. Really? He said, yeah, they were arrested last night. Yeah. So we got their name and called them up and went over and had supper with them and had a good time getting to know them. And they'd gotten arrested, came to their door at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night. Of course, the family was all in bed asleep. And the policeman came up there and he said, if I don't take y'all in, would y'all promise that you'll come in and get fingerprinted tomorrow? And they said, yes, we'll be glad to. So they went down to get fingerprinted and they got to the fingerprinting station. And the guy said, look, I'm not going to fingerprint you guys. This is crazy. So they hired a lawyer who had homeschooled years before the attorney had. He had homeschooled his children. He knew the DA. He called him up and says, look, it was Tom Shriver at the time. He called him up and he said, look, Tom, these people, they got all their records in place. They got their curriculum in place. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to win this thing. I mean, just forget this. I'm going to take care of this. So Tom Shriver went back to the authorities and said, look, I've got murder. I've got rape. I've got robberies going on. Y'all just need to work something out with these people. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to bother these people. I'm not going to take my time to do that. So they wound up being left alone after that. So it was a kind of interesting launch to our first homeschool family that we found out about in Tennessee.
It's fascinating to talk to folks who began homeschooling back in those days. I don't think today's homeschoolers often even know that that's how it really began. So after you went to supper with those, horrible criminal homeschooling parents, how did you and Lana get involved in homeschool leadership?
We wound up, as our number of homeschool contacts grew, finding out that there were several court cases. As a matter of fact, there were 5 court cases being prosecuted across Tennessee at the same time. And we met the 3 attorneys that were working with them. And the 2 of those attorneys got together and they said, look, we need to form an association so that we can start pushing back against this. One of the families, the mom wound up being arrested. She had her master's, was teaching in the public school. They had adopted 3 children. When she decided to homeschool, she took out her teacher position, but they also took out 5 students out of that grade, couple of grade levels. And that meant that school lost funding for that teacher position. So it was particularly onerous for the superintendent. So Mom wound up spending time in jail even after the family tried to comply with the requirements. But there were families across the state that were being prosecuted. So one of the attorneys invited Dr. Moore to come to Nashville, which he was happy to do. He made arrangements to come there. And when he got there, he said, look, you guys either need to band together or they're going to pick you off one by one. So at that time, we were ready to launch the Tennessee Home Education Association. So he put up signs over on the wall and just said, if you're from Memphis, go to this one. If you're from Knoxville, go to this one, And then the people that went to the different signs, he said, okay, select a leader and that person's going to be your leader for your area. And so that's the way we got launched.
So you guys are, your homeschool group in Tennessee is interesting in comparison to others, and it goes all the way back to that very first meeting, because you have regions,
right?
And that's the origin of the regions,
right? Exactly.
And so, go ahead.
From then till now, we've had an area coordinator in each of those regions across the state, and they represent the board of THEA. And when they come together, they elect the officers of THEA. So that's how we're organized.
So how did things go after you kind of banded together? Because to me, that's just fascinating, both from the homeschool history side of things, but also I've written about this and spoken about it. It's just such an American characteristic that when people join together for a cause, they almost immediately form a private association of volunteers who want to achieve the same laudable goal. So from the very early days, talk us through how your organization has grown and served homeschoolers in Tennessee.
Well, gosh, the impetus for having the meeting, for calling the meeting, was having 5 families in court. The 3 attorneys described what was going on, and we just said, we have to do something. So Dr. Moore's coming was a real strong catalyst in making that happen. So we reached out every way we could to try to find every homeschooler across the state. And so we all got together, about 250 of us, men, women, and children, for that meeting. And we got the organization launched because of those 5 families. And one of the families was charged with child abuse and neglect because the commissioner, the superintendent said that their home was not a school, so it was a form of child abuse. So they were threatened with having their children taken away. So it was a really catastrophic situation. And so when those families came together, and we came together for that meeting with Dr. Moore, the legislature was just going to go in session the next week. And we set as an objective to find a law. And so we actually wrote a bill and found a sponsor in the House easily, because the bill was written in Chattanooga, and we found a Chattanooga representative who was willing to carry it. And so we found the House sponsor, and then we began diving for a Senate sponsor, because you've got about 6 weeks from the time they go in session to the time they stop sponsoring bills. And if we'd only had a House sponsor, we would have had to go through the House, get it through the House, then take it to the Senate and get through the Senate. So it would have been much easier to have it going in both houses, House and Senate, at the same time. We finally were successful at finding a senator who was willing to sponsor the bill. So then we had the bill that we could start pushing. We literally were at the legislature every week, dozens of homeschool moms and dads coming to Nashville every week. And the board was meeting weekly also. Everybody was driving to Nashville to meet. So it was an amazing push, amazing commitment on the part of just volunteers willing to step forward. And we would meet and discuss the bills that we had drafted. We'd discuss the conversations we would have, and we would figure out responses to those conversations. We would figure out how would we change the bill, what could be done to try to make it so it was compatible. So we wound up going through that legislative session unsuccessfully. But at the same time, there was another bill introduced by the attorney for the Wilson County School Board that would have completely outlawed any small private school and home education. It would have been horrific if that had passed. So that stirred up some of the small private school people too then to be aware of this situation because of the bill that would have impacted them. Neither bill passed. They both were put into a study committee. And in Tennessee, when you go into a study committee, that means the bill's dead. But in this case, the bill was assigned to a Republican. It was democratically controlled House, Senate, and governor, but it was assigned to a Republican. Oh, perhaps the governor was Republican at the time. That was Lamar Alexander. Anyway, it was assigned to a Republican, and it was explained by the leading Democrat from the House Education Committee, that it was given to a Republican because no Democrat wanted to touch the dang thing. Mm-hmm. So Senator Leonard Donovan led the committee's meetings for discussion, in the summer and the early fall. And it was during that time that another bill was drafted. Now, the bill that was drafted, I believe, by that same senator that had introduced the bill to outlaw private schools, because he took the NEA recommendations for homeschooling, which were published in October of '84, and virtually everything in that suggested bill was in our state bill, with the one exception of state certification of all teachers. So that bill was then introduced in the legislature out of that committee, House and Senate, introduced, and started making its way through. So that was...
Now, just to clarify, the NEA bill wasn't good.
We didn't particularly like it at all. but it would have made home education legal.
Okay.
And actually, we had, in two of the court cases, I should tell you this, two of the court cases, the judge ruled that the state's compulsory attendance statute was unconstitutionally vague, and so it was struck down in two state-level courts because it said that a child must attend a school, public or private, and that it went on greatly about defining public school, but they had almost no definition of private school, so how could you know you're not in a private school, was the judge's reasoning. And HSLDA helped with that, to get that taken. No, the HSLDA did not help with that. That was done by the attorneys that were there before HSLDA actually got started.
So what year was this?
This was '84. Let's see, the cases were going on in '83, I think, and in '84. In '84, there were two courts that ruled it unconstitutional.
So just to go back to 1984, HSLDA was founded in 1983 by these two homeschool dads who were lawyers. Mike Smith was in private practice in Los Angeles, California, and Mike Ferris was working for a nonprofit, the Concerned Women for America, in Washington, D.C., when they started this Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And they were basically just taking phone calls, and they divided the country. Mike Smith took everything west of the Mississippi, and Mike Ferris took everything east of the Mississippi. And so Tennessee in 1984 maybe hadn't even heard of HSLDA yet.
No, had not. I actually met Mike Ferris in, I think it was Tulsa, in '85 was the first time I met him, and we immediately applied for it and became members of HSLDA at the time. And as a matter of fact, my wife and I had traveled, I think for my work, and we were in D.C., so we said, well, let's go by the office. So we went to the office, Concerned Women of America office, and met Chris Klicka, who was the first hire there, and met him. That was before he was married, and got to know Chris a little bit there, and appreciated his passion then and then throughout our whole time of knowing Chris, because of his passion for home education.
Yeah, that's, so Chris Klicka was the first attorney hired. He passed away, died from multiple sclerosis in 2009. And when you met him before he was married, he got hired by HSLDA because he wrote a law review article. This is always an amazing thing. He wasn't married, he didn't have kids, but he had a passion for homeschooling, a zeal that was actually, he believed that God was calling him when he got married and had kids that he would homeschool. So he did all this.
Wow.
He wrote a law review article.
Yeah.
And he was working for, he did a summer with an internship with a small nonprofit that I'm not even sure it's around anymore, but, and Mike Ferris read this article that he'd written, and he said, you have to come work for us because you've done the work that, we're doing other jobs and trying to get this thing off the ground. And so that's how the very early days of HSLDA, we got off the ground doing 50 state analyses of the laws and going to work in all 50 states.
Yeah.
So you must have gone to D.C. right around 85 or 86.
Yeah.
I
think 85.
85.
Yeah.
So what happened to the NEA bill?
Well, what happened is that it was introduced, it started working its way through, And the lobbyist for the Seventh-day Adventists that covered Kentucky and Tennessee, Mr. Irad C. Levering, who was about 80 at the time, came down to Tennessee, and he got to know Senator Donovan, or perhaps already knew him. But he persuaded Senator Donovan that it would be a good idea to put an exception in there for church-related schools instead of having to sign up with a local superintendent. So he convinced Senator Donovan of that without our awareness, and Senator Donovan worked to amend his bill on the Senate floor. And my Senator, Doug Henry, challenged him about the constitutionality of giving preference to one religion versus others because it specifically mentioned the Seventh-day Adventists. So that amendment was modified and then became attached to the bill. We worked through a lot of details of trying to get something that was satisfactory because they wanted to stop home education, is only K through 8. And so we wanted to extend that, of course. You could homeschool all the way through high school if you sign up with a superintendent, but only K through 8 if you sign up with a church-related school. So that was one of our sticking points that we worked through, but unsuccessfully, that we worked on. Another problem we had is that the testing requirements. They had a test requirement that had an onerous penalty if they didn't meet that requirement. And so that was one of our sticking points. So we began working on, and as I looked at that, I thought we're probably going to wind up with something in there, some kind of requirement. I looked at what they had I didn't like, and so I wrote up something as an alternative. And we went to a meeting, attorney and the representative from Chattanooga and I went to a meeting with Senator Donovan and the Commissioner of Education. And I showed that my suggestion to the two of them before going into that meeting. And they said, Claiborne, put that thing in your pocket and do not pull it out. And so we went into the meeting with that set of instructions, which I was happy to comply with. And we began the discussion. And we very quickly realized that we'd gotten to the point that the commissioner was not going to approve the bill if it didn't have some kind of restrictive language in it. And so they said, we just can't move ahead without that. So I looked at the representative from Chattanooga, looked at the attorney, and they both shook their head and they said, yeah. So I pulled out my suggestion of how to handle the lack of performance on tests if the homeschoolers were in that situation, handed that to them, and that wound up becoming part of the bill. So that was like the last hurdle that we had to face with the language of the bill. And then we worked the language through, and he worked it through in the Senate side. The House conformed, and we wound up getting the bill signed by Lamar Alexander in May of 1985.
That's amazing. And Lamar Alexander, of course, went on to become the senator from Tennessee, the U.S. senator from Tennessee, and he served. What was his
Department of Education?
He was the chair of the Department of Education,
right, and an advocate for compulsory attendance down to age 3.
And so, yes. You got to take the good with the bad, right?
So when I met him one time, I thanked him for signing that bill, and he was not overjoyed that I was thanking him for that. He had kind of signed it under duress because of the lack of having an enforceable compulsory attendance statute, I think. So
I've been listening to what you had to say while efforting the NEA's resolution on homeschooling.
Yes.
Which goes way back.
Okay.
The National Education Association believes that homeschooling programs based on parental choice cannot provide the student with a comprehensive education experience.
Yeah.
That's not the whole resolution, but that's that's the starting point from the National Education Experience Association. So smooth sailing since then, right?
No problem. As far as I know now, we're down to a point where I'm not aware of anybody in Tennessee that wants to homeschool that cannot homeschool unless there's divorce in the family and there's contention between mom and dad about that, because that is put under the judges to make a decision about that. The judge can just say, I know that there's 4 different legal alternatives. I don't care. You're going to have to enroll in the public school, period. And they can force them to do that. So.
Well, those are hard situations, and when the parent-child relationship, when the parents can't agree and the parents' relationship is broken, that makes it really difficult. So one of the things I know that you learned back then and you believe in strongly is having a strong presence of relationships between homeschooling families and the state legislature. When did you first start having kind of an organized Capitol Day, just not to work a bill, but just for the sake of developing relationships with the legislature?
1985. My office was right across the street from Legislative Plaza. So fortunately, I could go out on break, lunch break, and just walk across the street and be in the plaza. And I noticed all up and down the hall, there were different people there all the time promoting their cause. They'd set up a table, they'd have somebody there manning that table, answering questions for legislators or anybody that came by. They would just talk with them about their particular issue. And I thought, well, that's something we need to do. We were down there lobbying like crazy. My moms, dads, kids coming down. My wife and when another mom was asked by one of the representatives to come down and bring all their school books and show them what they were doing. And I don't think he ever voted with us, but he was willing to have a conversation, which was a welcome relief in that particular legislative situation. But what we found is that building those relationships is critical. And when there were some people that we're never going to win over, but we wanted them to see what we were doing. And we thought, look, they're not going to come in our homes. We don't want them in our homes, but we can go into their home and we can put out our material, come down there with our kids, talk to them about what we're doing, show them what we're doing. So first thing we did was we worked it out with the cafeteria there in the Legislative Plaza to be able to reset the cafeteria, to come in there and have a set of displays set up. We had some moms make food to come down. Moms and dads came from across the state, brought their displays. One of the dads was a welder teaching his son how to weld, so they had a display about welding, and there were all kinds of displays set up around the tables there in the cafeteria. And we invited all the legislators to come by there and to meet with us. And we set that up so that we could meet right at 5 o'clock, just as their day was ending, their committee day was ending. So they'd be walking down that hall by that door. So we thought we got a chance to catch them perhaps. And we had multiple of them come in there, and they were just interested, wanted to see. So that was our first one. Yeah.
And it's evolved over the years. I was honored you invited me to the 2024 Capitol Day, and it was very impressive. You guys actually took over one chamber of the legislature. Tell us how did that come about, that you got to that point?
Well, we saw that there's 2 or 3 groups were using using the House chamber for their debate. Now, forget what the organizations were, but we saw them in there using that, and we realized, well, perhaps we could ask for that as well. So we did, and we asked for that. And as you can imagine, in a government building like that, you have one clerk that's responsible for the House chamber. You have a completely separate clerk in charge of the Senate chamber. You had another person in charge of the library there, and another in charge of the old Supreme Court library, old Supreme Court offices. And then the hallways is something different. So you have multiple layers that you have to go through to get permissions for all those different spaces. But we've been successful at getting those spaces and using them. So we had a 2-hour program, and we were so delighted that you could come down there and be with us, Jim. That was really a highlight for us for you to come and to address us there in the chambers there. So we have a 2-hour program, and we bring probably 70 people across the stage during that time, with the people that sing, the people that play some of the music, with recognizing outstanding students, with inviting in, I think we had 5 or 7 legislators come over to speak with us briefly about, and to just address us and say hi. And of course, you're being there. And then we have recognized students that have won an apologetics contest, and they make their presentations there in the chamber. And so it's a very meaningful time for those families that are participating.
I just want to say something.
Yes, please.
So somebody was late the year that I was there, just a few months ago. And you came up to me and asked if I could go out of turn. And, same speech. It didn't matter to me if I went at 10 o'clock or at 10:30 or whatever.
Yeah.
So fine.
Very flexibly nice. It was lovely.
So fine.
Yeah.
I went early. And I thought I did pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And then you brought in these champion speechers, homeschooled kids, and like there's a 10-year-old and a teenager.
He was 9.
9-year-old, yeah. So make me feel even worse. And I was so thankful to you that you made me go before them, because if I had to go after them, I'd have been feeling terrible. They were so good.
So we had a 9-year-old, and then we had somebody who was graduating and headed to Patrick Henry. So, and they both just nailed it.
Nobody told me I was supposed to memorize my speech.
Well, we give them very clear instructions. They know the deal.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. The 9-year-old hopped out of his mom's lap, ran over. I pulled out the little platform so he could stand up to the microphone.
He couldn't see over the lectern.
Yeah. He stand there and he nailed that sucker.
Oh,
he just nailed it.
Yeah.
Run back over here, hops in his mama's lap.
It was a highlight for me.
Yeah.
And then after the program,
we tell everybody there, look, we've got 180 dozen cookies are in bags. They're ready to pass out to the legislators and their staff. Go take them to their staff. We've invited all the legislators and their staff to come up to the other room, their office building, because we've got lunch served for all of them. And then we have displays up there so that they can see those displays as they're waiting in line of homeschool material. Then in the afternoon, we have a student Congress debate in there where the students write their bills. They select the bills they want to speak in favor of, the ones they want to speak in opposition to. We've got a presiding officer, and we've got an interpreter, someone that evaluates the rules to see if somebody's violating a rule or not. So that's all homeschoolers. Then we have judges there to evaluate the presiding officers and the different people there in the House chamber, the Senate chamber, and in the old Supreme Court office down there, the old Supreme Court chamber. So we have quite a 3-ring circus, or maybe 10-ring circus going on there, because we serve lunch to the homeschoolers there in the Capitol and the library also. So we have a multifaceted day, and it's quite a delight. We ask each one of the families, look, take this cookie, go sit down, talk with your representative, talk with your senator, just spend 5 minutes with them. But we want that senator or that representative, when they're getting ready to push a button on a bill, we want them to be looking in your eyes, because they know somebody in their district that this is going to affect. And that has been a very effective tool for building those relationships with our legislators. Absolutely critical.
It's a very purposeful day. It builds the sort of the character of the association through the first part of the program, and then the relationship with the legislators in the next part of the program. And then there's this, just extraordinary civic education that goes on for the kids in the presence of, the folks that hang out in the Capitol building. So it's just a marvelous thing. And how important to you is it that you have that Capitol Day? Well,
just to describe how our association works, because we've got regional leaders, and several of the regional boards are larger than the state board, because they work to serve the homeschoolers in their local community. They work to help establish the support groups and the co-ops, the tutorials, the sports programs, any scouting programs. They work with the local colleges to try to help with issues there, but they have all the activities take place in the local area. The graduations take place there. We have one of the area coordinators started what he called a snowflake ball, and they have homeschoolers come to that, and they'll come there's no meal, but they get together, they have snacks and stuff, and they have a dance. But they love to come to those things. You can't really do that at the state level. So all the services for home education takes place through their Facebooks, through their websites, through their communicating people down there. At the state level, the primary thing that we're engaged with is tracking what the legislature's doing and try to keep up with that. We listen to what HSLDA says about the bills that are going to affect home education. We search those out ourselves. We look at what's going on internationally as well. And so the state association is working to communicate with our chapters and with our membership about what we're seeing. And so we track that. So our legislative day, we spend half of our budget for the year in that one day. But the state we don't have any full-time employees. We've got a reporter that tracks the legislative activity. We pay that person. But we see that as our primary job and responsibility, is to keep up with that. So we're free then to work just on that. We don't have a conference that we do. That's done at the local level. We don't have any convention that's local level or is done by outside vendors coming in. So we have pared down our responsibilities so that you can still live your life and keep a job and have a family, but also to take care of the things that are critical. So that's the way we've kind of divided things up in Tennessee.
Well, that's really remarkable. Just going back to the very founding of our country, when Alexis de Tocqueville came and toured, one of the things he remarked about was that in America, the things that the government would do in Europe or England, volunteers, not beholden to the government, not funded by the government, not working for the government, volunteers come together to achieve important goals for the benefit of families and the people they serve. And Tennessee is one of the primary examples, even today, all these many years since the founding, of the American character at work. And I just commend you and Lana and all of your board and all of the folks for all these years of service to homeschooling in Tennessee.
We certainly look back at the founders and we look at their heart of service, look at their commitment and the risk that they took signing that declaration, and look at that and stand in grateful awe that they were willing to do that and know the price that each one of those signers paid. Because it cost them dearly, every one of them. And so we feel very fortunate to have shoulders to stand on. We have a system that is designed for us to step forward and act in that way, and we have the freedom to step forward and act in that way if we just have the understanding of how to take and use the tools that are set out before us, to see those tools and then to figure out how to try to use those well to preserve what we've been entrusted with. And it's a complicated thing, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's a very dynamic dance that goes on to make that happen. And it's so encouraging to see other folks around Tennessee and all across the country, to see them step forward and to use those tools that we've been given of freedom, of free expression, of interacting with those that represent us, and working with those folks to help them see we're well intended. We have now can show good success, and they appreciate that. We want to honor them in their service. As a matter of fact, in honoring them in their service, one year our Rally Day theme after the 9/11, our Rally Day theme was to celebrate the military. So we identified each one of the legislators that had served in any branch of service, and we asked them to come and to be honored by us during our Rally Day program. And there were about 12 of them. Interestingly, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor were both in that category, but there was another fellow in that category, and that was that same attorney, Bob Rochelle, that had fought us from day one. He was still there. We sent him an invite. He didn't come during the program. We were tearing down because he was busy. His schedule didn't allow it. But he came in there, and he walks up to me and said, "Claiborne, what is this about?" I said, "Well, Senator Rochelle, I know that we have disagreement about certain things, but we wouldn't even have the freedom to have this discussion if you weren't willing to do what you did and going over there, being a Green Beret, being the most decorated veteran in our legislature. We wouldn't have the freedom to even have this discussion if you hadn't done that. So we appreciate that. Okay, I can accept that, was his response. So you can build relationships if you look through the systems that are there and try to find ways to make those connections. And that's critically important with your friends and even with those you might have some disagreement with.
So I cannot leave this interview with you without giving you the opportunity to say just how important Lana has been throughout all these years. I've known her as long as I've known you. And, she's sort of a force of nature.
Yes.
And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to let people know just how much she's done as well.
Well, Lana started out as, look, I was an art major. I don't know how to teach a kid how to read. That was kind of where we started. We studied together and worked on that. We decided to launch in home education. And then 3 years later, it's, Lana, let's take this box of books right here and get a friend and go talk with a legislator. Oh, no, I can't do that. And then all of a sudden no, I have to go do that. I have to go do that. That's part of us earning our freedom and establishing it. So she goes down to that meeting, and just one step by another step by another step, those kinds of anxieties that she had about that engagement just melted and went away. She is now, as you say, a force of nature. She has been working since 1997, when the fax came through from Mike Ferris about speech and debate, or about launching debate. She said, I'm good with this. I've got to do this. So from that day until now, she's been involved with speech and debate, with Mike Ferris, with NCFCA, now with THEA, so involved straight through. She's led a club for the last, approaching 20 years, I think. And she has a couple of tournaments a year. But she is such a powerful advocate for seeing young people have their skill sets developed so that they can communicate clearly. And it's all about knowing the truth and communicating that truth clearly to the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ. And that when that came through, that completely grabbed her heart, because that is the deep passion of her life, is loving the Lord and seeing her children love the Lord and seeing the people that she knows love the Lord and be faithful to his truth and walk with him. So there's nothing that drives her more to action than that. And so she and I have been fortunate to be a team together. I feel very fortunate. I think the proverb says, a house is a blessing from your father, but a good wife is a blessing from the Lord. And Lana has been and continues to be a huge blessing to me for these 52 years. Yeah.
Well, you and Lana have been a blessing to me and Debbie and to the homeschooling world. We assemble here with leaders from all over the country, and you're a blessing to each of them as well. How would people, if they wanted to learn more about your Home Education Association here in Tennessee, how would they find you? And can they reach out to you for some mentoring helps if they need it?
Again, that's something that we're delighted to work on, and primarily that has taken place through the chapters and through their leadership and through the people that are working with them. TNHEA.org is our website, Tennessee Home Education Association, and each of our chapters has their own websites, Facebook pages, and those sorts of things. So you can reach out and get in touch with us. And if you come to the THEA site, you can find the link to each one of the other chapters, so you can be able to get the local help that you need, because we have a lot of people that move to Tennessee, and they're, Knoxville or Memphis or Chattanooga or wherever they're moving to. There's folks moving here all the time, and so we try to open the door and help them get plugged into our unusual law. I think we're the only state, perhaps Alabama has church-related school enrollment, and Tennessee does. So we're pretty unique in that regard. But that's where most homeschoolers actually sign up, is through the church-related schools. So we'd be glad to help them. Certainly would be. but that'd be a great way to do it. My phone number is on the website, so I'm glad to talk with people if they need help.
Well, thank you. My guest today has been Claiborne Thornton, one of the pioneer homeschoolers in America and one of the most important homeschooling couples here in Tennessee, where our national conference is meeting this week. If you would like to find out more about them, you can go to the website that Claiborne just recited. And if you'd like to join with HSLDA to be part of the cause for homeschool freedom all over across the country, you can find us at hslda.org. We'd love to have you join. We're a cause organization. We care deeply about freedom and about parental rights and about the ability of parents to be able to educate their children at home in the way that they think best for their own kids. So thank you. Once again, I'm Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this has been another episode of Homeschool Talks.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's Member Savings Program. Did you know that your HSLDA membership can pay for itself with our specially negotiated discounts on products and services? You can save on expenses like rental cars, hotel reservations, technology, curriculum, school supplies, and more. And we're continually adding more discounts. Visit our website at hslda.org/member savings for an up-to-date list. That's hslda.org/member savings. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.